The hall was filled with people chatting and laughing, the soft hum of voices blending with the clinking of glasses. It was a warm evening, the kind where people dressed in elegant clothes and smiled easily at one another. The room was decorated simply but with care. Candles flickered on small tables, and the soft lighting gave the room a cozy glow despite the crowd. A grand piano stood at one side of the room, its polished surface reflecting the warm lights. Most people barely noticed it, focused on the conversation and the food laid out on long tables. Among the guests was a woman who had come quietly, almost unnoticed. She wore a simple dress that was modest and plain, not at all like the flashy outfits many others had chosen for the evening. Her hair was neatly tied back, and she carried herself with a quiet grace that made her blend into the background. She didn't speak much to anyone, simply observing, taking in the room and the people with a gentle curiosity. A small group of guests, standing near the center of the room, noticed her. They were a lively bunch, always looking for amusement and quick to make jokes at the expense of others. When one of them spotted the woman near the piano, a mischievous idea formed in their minds. They nudged each other and whispered, laughter barely contained. One of them, with a playful smirk, suggested that she should play the piano, jokingly. Everyone would see, they thought, that she had no skill, and it would be a moment of harmless fun. They expected her to decline or perhaps make an awkward attempt, something that would make the room laugh. The suggestion reached her ears, and she paused, glancing at the group. She could sense the teasing tone, the expectation that she would fail or make a fool of herself. Her heart beat a little faster, but there was no panic. She took a deep breath, feeling a calmness settle over her that was surprising even to herself. She wasn't a person who usually sought attention, and she knew the group expected her to say no. But something inside nudged her forward. Maybe it was the thought of the piano itself, sitting there waiting. Or perhaps it was the quiet determination she had carried in her life through years of small, unnoticed moments. Whatever it was, she felt ready to rise to this unexpected challenge. The group noticed her hesitation and thought they had won. They leaned in slightly, ready to laugh, expecting the humorous outcome they had imagined. But instead of panicking, she smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, and nodded. She would play. The room, oblivious to the significance of her choice, continued its chatter, the soft hum of conversation filling the air. A few curious glances were directed her way as she walked toward the piano. Some guests whispered to each other, wondering why she would agree to such a thing. The organizers of the event, noticing her approach, exchanged polite glances and tried to reassure her, saying it was perfectly fine if she didn't want to play. She only nodded again, and without a word, she seated herself at the piano bench. The moment she sat, the light in the room seemed to shift. People began to notice her more clearly, seeing her for the first time not as a quiet background figure, but as someone poised and calm. The group who had suggested the joke looked around nervously, sensing that perhaps this was not going as they had imagined. The guests nearest to the piano leaned slightly forward, curious to see what would happen. Phones were raised by some, ready to capture a funny moment. The woman's hands rested lightly on the keys, her fingers hovering just above them. She closed her eyes for a brief second, centering herself, feeling the weight of the keys beneath her fingers even before pressing them. The anticipation in the room grew. Though most people were unaware of why their attention had shifted so suddenly, she began with the first note, soft and deliberate. It was not loud, not demanding attention, but it was clear and precise. A hush fell over the crowd. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The gentle melody seemed to pull the focus of the room toward her, as if the air itself had shifted to accommodate her music. Those who had whispered jokes to each other moments before found themselves silent, captivated by the unexpected sound. The piano, which had been merely a piece of furniture moments ago, now became a vessel for something powerful and unseen. Her fingers moved with ease and confidence, each note carefully chosen and played with emotion that spoke louder than any words could. People began to look around, noticing the change. Some faces expressed surprise, others awe, and a few eyes shone with tears that had come unbidden. The woman played as if she had been preparing for this moment her entire life, though no one had known her before. Each chord, each gentle scale, seemed to fill the room with a story of resilience, of quiet strength, of years spent learning and practicing in secret. The group that had intended to mock her now exchanged glances of disbelief. The joke they had planned had dissolved before their eyes, replaced by a performance that demanded respect and attention. As the first notes continued, a subtle rhythm emerged, flowing naturally from her hands. The guests who had been casual and distracted were now leaning in, completely absorbed. Some had stopped holding their glasses, letting them rest on the tables as they listened. The melody was soft but commanding, carrying an emotional weight that was unexpected from someone who appeared so unassuming. Every note seemed to connect with something deep inside the listeners, awakening feelings of wonder, admiration, and surprise. The room felt smaller, more intimate, as if the music had drawn everyone closer together without anyone moving a step. In this quiet but intense moment, the woman's face remained calm, almost serene. She did not smile or seek approval, nor did she rush through the notes. Each movement was deliberate, each pause meaningful. The room, once filled with chatter and laughter, was now united in silent attention. People who had been skeptical or dismissive found themselves caught in a shared experience that no one had anticipated. The piano, the notes, and the presence of the woman had transformed the atmosphere entirely. The intended humor of a mock performance had vanished, replaced by something genuine and profoundly moving. She was no longer just a guest at the event. She was the center of the room's attention, not by seeking it, but by earning it through skill and heart. Those who had gathered closest to watch were amazed. Some held their breath as if afraid to disturb the magic of the moment. Others exchanged glances of disbelief, trying to understand how someone so quiet and ordinary-looking could produce such beauty. Even the staff, who had been busy moving trays and checking arrangements, paused to listen, drawn to the music. Every note, though simple in structure, seemed to carry an emotion that words could never capture. The room had been transformed by the presence of the music, the skill of the hands, and the quiet confidence of the woman at the piano. As the last notes of the piece faded into the soft hum of the hall, a brief moment of silence followed. The audience, stunned by the unexpected display, took a heartbeat before realizing what had just occurred. Eyes met eyes, and lips formed small, surprised smiles. Some guests whispered softly to each other, still processing what they had heard. The group who had planned the joke stood frozen, their previous amusement replaced by awe and a touch of embarrassment. They had underestimated her completely, and now there was no room for doubt. This was no casual performance. She had captivated the crowd, silenced their laughter, and turned an attempted joke into an unforgettable experience. The woman slowly lifted her hands from the keys, her movements gentle, almost unassuming. She did not look around the room or seek acknowledgement. She simply allowed the music to rest where it had created its mark. The audience, now fully aware of what they had witnessed, began to clap softly at first, then louder as the realization of her talent settled in. The applause was not just for the music but for the courage, for the unexpected brilliance, for the way she had taken a moment meant for ridicule and turned it into something extraordinary. She remained seated for a moment, breathing gently, accepting the applause with quiet grace, never breaking the calm that had defined her from the very beginning. In that one performance, the woman had transformed how everyone saw her. No longer was she just the quiet guest in plain clothes. She was the musician, the person who had brought the room together with a few notes on a piano. The memory of that evening would linger, not because of who had planned the joke, but because of her presence, her skill, and the unexpected beauty she had shared with everyone. The quiet guest had become the center of attention, not through words or showiness, but through her music, her talent, and her ability to seize a moment that others had thought would be her downfall. And in that quiet hall, under the warm glow of the lights, everyone understood that appearances could be deceiving, and that true skill and heart often reveal themselves when least expected. The applause was still echoing through the hall when the woman slowly rose from the piano bench. Her hands lingered for a moment over the keys, almost in farewell, and then she stepped back. People watched her with wide eyes, still trying to grasp what they had just heard. There was a mixture of awe and disbelief in the room. Even the group who had initially intended to make a joke felt a sudden weight of humility. They had thought this would be a simple moment of laughter, something small that they could tease her about. But now it was clear that they had underestimated her completely. She walked toward a corner of the room, moving with calm confidence, as though nothing unusual had just occurred. Her quiet demeanor drew attention, not because it demanded it, but because there was something in the way she carried herself that invited it. Guests who had been chatting moments before now found themselves looking at her, trying to catch a glimpse of the person who had so effortlessly captivated them. The room felt different, charged with a new energy that had come from her performance. People spoke in softer voices now, almost reluctant to break the spell that had been created. A few of the attendees approached her, offering sincere compliments and asking questions about her experience. She responded with gentle smiles and brief, thoughtful answers. She did not boast or explain at length, but her calm presence made it clear that her music came from a deep place of practice and passion. Those who spoke with her felt a warmth, a genuine kindness that made their admiration grow even more. It was as if her music had not only silenced the room, but had also touched hearts in a way that words could not. Meanwhile, the group that had planned the joke gathered quietly, huddled together. They whispered among themselves, a mix of surprise and embarrassment in their voices. One of them admitted, almost reluctantly, that they had completely misjudged her. Another nodded, still shaken by the depth and emotion of her performance. There was no trace of the amusement they had expected to find. The joke had evaporated, replaced by a profound respect they did not anticipate feeling. They watched from a distance as she mingled gently with the guests, and for the first time, they saw her not as an object of ridicule, but as someone remarkable. The organizers of the event, who had been busy managing the crowd and ensuring the evening went smoothly, were equally impressed. They exchanged quiet words, noting how her performance had transformed the energy in the room. The hall that had been filled with polite conversation and small talk was now alive with quiet reverence. People moved more slowly, spoke more thoughtfully, and listened with care. Even those who had arrived expecting a light and easy evening found themselves moved by the unexpected beauty they had witnessed. The piano, which had once been a simple decoration, had become the center of the evening, and she had been the one to bring it to life. As the minutes passed, small groups of guests continued to approach her. Some were musicians themselves, curious about her technique and the emotions she conveyed. Others were simply people who had been touched by her music and wanted to express their admiration. She accepted each comment with a humble nod, never drawing attention to herself, but allowing her presence to shine through in the way she listened and responded. Her calm demeanor was magnetic, drawing people closer not through words, but through a quiet assurance that came from her skill and her heart. The laughter and casual joking that had filled the room earlier were now almost entirely replaced by a soft, contemplative atmosphere. Conversations focused on her performance, on the surprising depth of talent in someone who had appeared so ordinary. People whispered about how she could play with such emotion and precision, about how her music had seemed to tell a story that everyone could feel, but no one could describe. The hall was no longer just a place for a social gathering. It had become a space where people were connected by the experience they had just shared. The power of her music lingered, wrapping around the guests like a quiet, gentle current. Even the children at the event were drawn to her. A few had been playing quietly near the edges of the room, but now they approached with wide eyes, curious about the woman who had made the piano sound so magical. She smiled at them softly, allowing them to watch as she demonstrated a simple passage on the keys. Their eyes sparkled with fascination, and some even tried to imitate the notes she played, giggling softly at their own attempts. Her gentle encouragement and patient presence made them feel included, part of a moment that had begun with uncertainty, but had grown into something memorable and inspiring. As the evening continued, it became clear that her performance had left a lasting impact. Guests spoke in low, respectful tones about the unexpected talent they had witnessed. Even those who were usually quick to judge appearances found themselves reconsidering their assumptions. The quiet woman, who had been unnoticed and underestimated, had not only silenced the crowd with her music, but had also quietly taught a lesson about respect, humility, and the hidden depths of people we may never fully know. Her presence changed the tone of the evening, and the story of her performance began to spread from group to group, whispered from one guest to another, building a sense of shared awe. The night moved forward, yet the memory of her music lingered in the minds of everyone present. Conversations often returned to her performance, people reflecting on the beauty and skill they had witnessed. The piano, once an overlooked piece of furniture, remained in the center of attention, a symbol of the extraordinary talent that could come from the most unexpected places. Guests left with a sense of wonder, a quiet inspiration that would stay with them long after the event had ended. And through it all, she remained humble, walking among the people with grace, her quiet strength leaving a mark that no one would forget. The soft glow of the lights in the hall continued to reflect off the polished piano, casting gentle shadows that seemed to dance in the quiet moments. After her brief pause, the woman returned to the piano, not out of obligation, but because something inside her urged her to continue. She sat again, adjusting the bench just slightly, and her hands hovered above the keys as she took a deep breath. The room seemed to recognize the change, the guests instinctively quieting, Drawn by the subtle promise of more music, conversations that had started to pick up earlier now faded into whispers, replaced by a sense of anticipation that hung in the air. She began to play again, this time with a softer, more intricate melody. The notes seemed to weave around each other, creating a tapestry of sound that was both delicate and rich. It was as though the music had a life of its own, carrying the emotions of years she had spent practicing and understanding the language of the piano. The people who had gathered around leaned in closer, unable to look away. Every keystroke seemed intentional, filled with feeling, telling a story that words could never capture. Her fingers moved with ease, dancing across the keys in a rhythm that was both natural and captivating. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the music fill their minds completely. They were transported by the beauty of what they were hearing, caught in a wave of emotion that made them forget the surroundings. Others watched her hands, fascinated by the skill and control she displayed. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It had become an extension of her, a way to express herself in ways that went beyond speaking or smiling. Even those who were usually skeptical of such performances found themselves drawn in, feeling something profound and unexpected. A few of the children who had been watching her earlier tiptoed closer, their curiosity piqued by the magic of the sound. She noticed them and smiled gently, acknowledging their presence without interrupting the flow of her music. Her smile was soft, kind, encouraging, and it seemed to invite them to feel the music in their own way. Some began to hum along quietly, not fully aware of the complexity of what she was playing, but enchanted by the sound. The adults around them watched with quiet amusement, moved by the way she could capture both the attention of children and the respect of seasoned guests. With the same gentle touch as the melody continued, the people who had been part of the group that initially planned the joke stood frozen near the side of the room. Their previous laughter and snide remarks had vanished entirely. They were watching, completely absorbed, and for the first time, they realized that their assumptions about her were entirely wrong. One of them whispered softly, almost to themselves, expressing disbelief at the talent in front of them. Another nodded, the weight of respect settling in where amusement had once been. They had come expecting humor, expecting a momentary spectacle, and had instead been given something much greater, an honest, unassuming brilliance that left them speechless. The organizer of the event, moving quietly among the guests to ensure everything ran smoothly, paused near the piano. They had seen many performances before, but this one was different. There was an authenticity in her playing that could not be taught or faked. The music was alive, breathing with the emotions she poured into each note. The hall itself seemed to respond to her playing, the acoustics carrying each note with clarity and depth. Even the softest passages reached every corner, touching the ears and hearts of all present. The audience was completely captivated, the usual distractions of an event forgotten in the face of such artistry. A gentle murmur of appreciation began to ripple through the room. It was not laughter or casual chatter, but a quiet acknowledgement of the talent before them. People exchanged looks, their eyes reflecting the emotions stirred by the music. Some clutched their hands to their chests, feeling a warmth or a twinge of something deep inside. The performance was affecting them in ways they could not fully articulate. The melody was simple yet profound, familiar yet unique, and it had a way of connecting everyone present without a single word being spoken. She shifted slightly, changing the tempo, allowing the music to breathe and flow in a new direction. The variation surprised the listeners, keeping their attention fixed and their hearts engaged. Each note, each pause, was intentional, creating tension and release in a way that kept everyone on the edge of anticipation. Her skill was evident not just in speed or technique, but in the emotion she conveyed and the way she made every note meaningful. The audience was learning something from her performance, that beauty could emerge from simplicity, that talent could be quiet yet powerful, and that appearances often hid extraordinary ability. As she played, some of the guests began to whisper to each other, sharing their astonishment quietly. They spoke of the surprise they felt, of how they had underestimated someone so unassuming. They noted the way her music seemed to tell a story without words, capturing moments of joy, longing, and reflection. The children continued to watch, some gently tapping their fingers in rhythm, completely absorbed by the sound. Others leaned on their parents' arms, wide-eyed, feeling the power of the performance even without fully understanding it. It was a shared experience, binding the room together in a quiet, respectful silence. The performance reached a point where the melody became more complex, yet it never lost its emotional depth. Her hands moved faster now, yet each note remained precise, clean, and filled with feeling. The room felt alive, yet everyone remained still, captivated. There was a beauty in the contrast between the complexity of the music and the simplicity of her presence. She did not play to impress. She played to communicate. The distinction was clear to everyone watching, and it made the experience even more profound. This was not a performance for applause or attention, it was a performance that came from her heart, and the audience could feel it. Slowly, she began to bring the piece to a close. The notes became softer, more deliberate, fading like a gentle whisper. The guests leaned in, sensing the ending, wanting to hold on to the experience a little longer. The last note lingered in the air, a soft echo that seemed to reach every corner of the hall. For a moment, there was complete silence. People's eyes opened, and they realized what they had just witnessed. The room, which had been filled with polite conversation and casual chatter, now felt connected, united by the beauty they had just shared. It was a collective acknowledgement of something remarkable. The woman lifted her hands from the keys and let them rest in her lap. She did not rise immediately, allowing the silence to remain for a few moments, as if giving the audience a chance to absorb the final notes. Then, slowly, she stood, her calm presence commanding respect without any need for words. The guests began to clap, softly at first, then louder as they realized the depth of what they had experienced. The applause was genuine, heartfelt, and unprompted. It was an acknowledgement not just of skill, but of courage, humility, and the quiet power of someone who had refused to be defined by others' expectations. The group that had intended the joke remained near the back, unable to fully leave their spot. They watched as people approached her with smiles, compliments, and quiet admiration. Their own embarrassment was tempered by the undeniable talent they had just witnessed. It was a lesson in humility, one they would not soon forget. They realized that their assumptions had been shallow, and they could not help but feel respect for someone who had taken an unexpected moment and turned it into something extraordinary. Throughout the evening, the woman remained composed, moving gently among the guests who wished to speak with her. She answered questions briefly, always with a soft smile and a calm voice. There was no need for self-promotion. Her presence and her performance spoke for themselves. The audience was left with a sense of awe and inspiration, a feeling that would stay with them long after the event ended. The piano had been transformed from a simple instrument into a vessel of emotion and connection, and she had been the one to make that transformation possible. In that moment, she had shown everyone the power of quiet talent, the impact of dedication, and the extraordinary effect that one person could have on an entire room. The room had settled into a quiet hum of admiration when the woman remained near the piano, her presence calm and steady. People were still talking in hushed tones about the performance they had just witnessed, unable to shake the impact of the music. Some moved closer, drawn not just by curiosity, but by the way she seemed to command respect effortlessly. She smiled gently at those who approached, nodding and listening, but never speaking more than needed. Her quiet demeanor made her approachable, yet it carried an undeniable aura of authority, as if the music itself had elevated her beyond the ordinary. As she interacted with the guests, it became clear that her performance had created ripples far beyond what anyone had expected. People who had only intended to make polite conversation were now engaged in deeper discussions about music, talent, and the stories that lived within each note she played. Even those who had not been close to the piano had been affected. They exchanged glances, sharing unspoken awe at the way someone so unassuming had turned what could have been a simple, forgettable evening into a moment they would remember forever. The group that had planned the joke earlier stayed at a distance, observing in silence. Their previous amusement had vanished completely. They watched as other guests sought her attention, offering compliments and asking questions, and they felt a quiet recognition of the mistake they had made. Their earlier intention to create laughter at her expense had been replaced by admiration and respect, an acknowledgement of a talent they had underestimated. Some of them whispered softly to each other, still in disbelief at the depth of skill and emotion they had witnessed. Meanwhile, the woman gently returned to the piano for a few brief moments, exploring the keys with soft, delicate movements. She played short passages now, each note deliberate and expressive, revealing a subtle mastery of tone and emotion. The audience leaned in, listening intently, captivated by the way she could communicate so much with a few notes. It was not about showing off or performing for applause. It was about sharing a part of herself through the instrument. The music filled the hall once again, but this time it was quieter, more intimate, allowing each listener to feel connected in their own way. Guests began to approach her with stories of their own experiences with music, Some shared childhood memories of learning an instrument. Others spoke of music that had moved them during difficult times. She listened patiently, nodding and smiling, creating a sense of connection that went beyond the music itself. Her presence and willingness to engage made people feel valued, as if their stories mattered and were being honored by someone who understood the language of emotion through sound. The room had shifted from a casual social gathering to a place of shared human experience, all sparked by her quiet strength and remarkable talent. The children who had been enchanted earlier were now more confident, sitting close to watch her hands move across the keys. She encouraged them with soft smiles, guiding their small fingers to press certain keys and letting them feel the vibrations of the sound. Their laughter and excitement were gentle, blending seamlessly with the soft melodies she created. In this way, she nurtured a love for music without ever needing to teach formally, showing them that talent and curiosity could grow quietly and naturally. The adults observed this interaction, moved by the warmth and patience she displayed, and felt inspired by the genuine connection she fostered. As the evening progressed, people began to realize that this night would not be like others they had attended. The energy in the hall had changed, no longer centered on appearances, social status, or superficial conversation. Instead, it revolved around the shared experience of music and the quiet power of someone who had been underestimated. Guests lingered near the piano, reluctant to let the moment end, and continued to converse in soft voices about the emotions stirred by her performance. The conversation was no longer shallow. It carried depth, reflection, and appreciation for something authentic. The woman occasionally played brief passages again, each time drawing the room into the subtle nuances of her music. She varied the tempo and tone, creating different moods that resonated with everyone present. At times, the music was light and playful, bringing smiles and gentle laughter. At other moments, it was deep and reflective, drawing thoughtful silence. Each variation demonstrated not only her technical skill, but her sensitivity and understanding of the emotional impact music could have. People watched, listened, and felt, realizing that they were experiencing something rare and profound. Even the staff at the event, who had initially focused on their duties, found themselves caught in the spell of her presence. They paused to listen, to watch the way she interacted with the audience, and to notice how her music could change the atmosphere entirely. It was no longer just an event they were managing. It had become a shared experience, a memory in the making. Her music had reached beyond the surface of the room, touching hearts in ways that everyone could feel, even without fully understanding why. The effect was subtle, yet undeniably powerful, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The group that had tried to mock her now began to feel a sense of quiet regret for their intentions. They had underestimated the woman completely, and now they watched as others gravitated naturally toward her. They observed the sincere smiles, the respectful conversations, and the admiration that seemed to follow her every movement. Their embarrassment was tempered by an awareness of her talent, and the grace with which she had carried herself. They had intended to make her the source of amusement, but instead, she had become the source of inspiration, and they could do nothing but acknowledge it silently. As the night drew on, the woman continued to engage with the audience in subtle, meaningful ways. She did not demand attention but allowed it to come naturally. Simply by being herself and sharing her music, people responded with genuine respect, recognizing not just her skill, but the courage it had taken to play in front of an audience that had initially doubted her. She had turned an awkward, potentially humiliating moment into one of connection, admiration, and inspiration. Her quiet determination had transformed the expectations of the room and left everyone with a sense of wonder. Eventually, she stepped back from the piano for the final time that evening. She allowed the music to fade into silence, giving everyone a moment to breathe and reflect. The applause that followed was sincere and heartfelt, lasting longer than any brief acknowledgement of skill might. People clapped not just for the performance, but for the courage, the humility, and the quiet strength that had carried it. The piano, once just a piece of furniture, had become a symbol of the extraordinary that can emerge from the most unexpected places, and the woman, through her quiet presence and remarkable talent, had shown everyone that true brilliance often exists where least expected, waiting to be revealed. The night had grown deeper, and the soft glow of the lights reflected gently across the polished surface of the piano. People began to shift, some moving toward the exits, others lingering to savor the last moments of an evening transformed by unexpected talent. The woman, calm and composed, remained near the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys. as if she were keeping a connection with the music that had defined the night. Her presence was quiet, yet it commanded attention, not through demand but through the lingering impact of her performance, and the respect she had earned. Guests moved toward her in small groups, offering sincere thanks and sharing reflections on how the music had touched them. Some spoke of emotions they had not realized they carried, stirred to the surface by the melodies she had played. Others shared their surprise at how someone so quiet and unassuming could possess such extraordinary talent. She listened patiently, smiling softly, her responses simple yet filled with warmth. There was no need for elaboration or explanation. The audience felt the depth of her skill and the sincerity of her presence. Through the way she engaged with them, the group that had initially planned the joke lingered near the edge of the room, still quietly observing. Their amusement had been replaced entirely by admiration and humility. They watched as people approached her with respect and gratitude, and they felt a subtle shift within themselves. They had intended to elicit laughter, to make her the source of a fleeting joke, yet they found themselves learning a lesson in humility and the power of hidden talent. Their earlier intentions seemed shallow in comparison to the genuine connection she had created, and they recognized that this was a moment they would never forget. Some guests asked to hear a few more notes, hoping to capture once more the magic they had experienced. She allowed it, her fingers brushing the keys with a quiet grace, playing gentle phrases that were intimate and delicate. The music seemed to echo the shared experiences of the evening, weaving a connection between her and everyone in the room. People leaned in, silent, absorbing the subtlety and beauty of each note. Even in these brief moments, it was clear that her music carried an authenticity and depth that transcended simple performance. It communicated patience, understanding, and a quiet joy in sharing something personal. The children, who had been enchanted earlier, returned for a final glimpse. She welcomed their presence with a warm smile, showing them small techniques and allowing them to explore the keys briefly. Their laughter and delight blended softly with the lingering melody, adding an innocent joy to the atmosphere. The adults observed, moved by the way she nurtured curiosity and respect in a simple, natural way. The interaction emphasized that her talent was not just in music but in the way she engaged with people, making everyone feel valued and connected. Slowly, the room began to empty, but the impact of the evening remained. Conversations moved to reflection, with guests quietly acknowledging how rare it was to witness such genuine skill and heart. The piano, once a mere piece of decoration, had become the centerpiece of an unforgettable experience. The woman's quiet strength and humility had allowed her to turn a moment that could have been embarrassing into a night of inspiration, leaving everyone with a story they would carry long after the lights dimmed. Even as the room cleared, some guests lingered, hoping to express their final thoughts. They spoke of admiration, respect, and gratitude, and she accepted each with the same calm, unassuming grace. She never sought to dominate the moment or claim praise. Instead, she let the music and the shared experience speak for her. Her presence had created a sense of unity among the guests, a quiet understanding that beauty and talent could emerge where least expected, and that sometimes the most remarkable moments came from those who remained humble and unnoticed until the right time. The organizers of the event, moving among the departing guests, shared quiet smiles, acknowledging the profound effect her performance had on the evening. The atmosphere had shifted from polite social gathering to a space filled with genuine connection and reflection. It was clear that her music had touched everyone present in a way that would not fade with the night. Conversations would continue, but now they carried an added layer of depth and inspiration, a reminder of what could happen when talent met opportunity and courage. The woman took a final, gentle glance at the piano. It had been her companion for the evening, a medium through which she had expressed her skill and shared her heart. She smiled softly, knowing that the impact of her performance had extended far beyond the room, into the thoughts and emotions of everyone present. The quiet confidence she carried was evident in the way she moved and spoke, leaving a lasting impression that would remain in the memories of those who had witnessed her play. As she left the hall, the warmth of the evening lingered. Guests spoke in subdued tones about the remarkable talent they had experienced, reflecting on how quickly assumptions could be proven wrong. The group that had intended to mock her moved silently, understanding that they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that could not be reduced to a simple joke or laughter. Her music had transcended expectations, creating a memory of skill, humility, and human connection that would endure outside. The night air was cool and calm. She walked quietly, carrying herself with the same grace and humility that had defined the evening. The impact of her performance would continue to ripple through the minds of those who had watched, a reminder that appearances often conceal extraordinary abilities. The story of the quiet woman at the piano would be shared among guests for weeks to come, not as gossip or amusement, but as a testament to talent, courage, and the beauty of unexpected brilliance. The piano remained behind in the hall, silent now, but forever transformed by the music that had filled it. The guests departed with a sense of awe and inspiration, each carrying a piece of the night in their hearts. The woman had shown, through her quiet presence and remarkable skill, that even the simplest, unassuming moments could become extraordinary. She had turned a situation meant for laughter into a lasting memory of human connection, beauty, and respect. Her performance had reminded everyone present that true talent could not be judged by appearances, and that courage and humility often speak louder than words.